Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fisherman's Favorite Podcast. We're sitting here today. We got Jace Peterson down on the end, Sam Larsen in the middle, Charlie Peterson in the other middle, and I'm Joe Ohman down on the end. We're coming at you today with 2024's new open water products. We just wanted to go over what's coming. Obviously, some of it's already come. Some of it is still yet to be launched, but it's out there. You've kind of seen a little sneak peek of it here and there, but we're going to dive into it and give you a rundown on what we got here.
There's deer in the meadow, frogs in the pond, a place up the river where the fish are getting long. Bass in the lilies, crappie in the reeds, walleye on the rocks and pike in the weeds. There's a fella down the road who's a real fishing man, give you a stringer for the frying pan. Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.
Welcome back, everybody. Like Joe said, this is going to be all about the 2024 new open water stuff. We did some pre-release on some of these items last year, but for the most part, availability in stores, good stock on everything is going to happen this summer. So we're super excited about it. Some of the stuff we've been fishing for 3 years even in the testing phase, but we've all got to fish with a little bit of it. So we're just going to kind of run through what we like and what we got for coming out. So
where should we start?
I feel like we should start with some of Northland's bread and butter and go into some of the walleye jigs.
You got to start with the Deep V family.
Yeah. So Deep V family, we got a whole two new platforms there. One would be the Deep V Spin, and the second would be the Deep V Flash Tail. And we've seen a trend in the past few years of dress jigs and kind of that bling jigs kind of reoccurring. And we knew the Deep V would be a perfect platform to add some of that too. So we've had the Deep V Bucktail for a number of years now, and that's been doing really, really well for us. Anglers love it. But we wanted to add to that family, but make it different. So that's where we came up with this Deep V Flash. So what it is, it's dressed Deep V jig, but instead of a natural hair material, it's got that mylar flashaboo type reflective material on it. So really bright, just kind of a cool looking jig. So
you're going to get extra shimmer and flash out of that all the time, but where's that really going to excel?
Yeah, I think where I see it excelling personally is those dirty water situations. Been really excited to take it up to the Rainy River, fish with it there. We fished with it a little bit there last year. That's been really good. Also regionally, it seems like the Great Lakes guys, along with us testing, we get it to all of our pro staff and whatnot. But the Great Lakes, some of the bigger water guys have really been keying in on that bait and using it with live bait and also just plain too. So,
yeah, I mean, just looking at it, it looks like a perfect jig for dirty water, dirty river fishing. I know Bro used it on the Rainy River last year, and he also used it quite a bit just around his kind of area.
Yeah,
and I think he used the smallest size too for some crappies too. So.
Yeah, he did. Which that's this little micro guy here. 16th,
that's a 16th, yeah.
16th ounce. So it's pretty cool little jig. Available in all the Deep V sizes: 16th, 8th, quarter, and 3/8. And obviously has that Deep V keeled head on it. So
show that to him again. So if you look at how much shimmer you're getting off of that skirt. Would you say this is like you took your classic metallic gold jig and it's on steroids now? You got so much more flash and so much more pop than you would with just a metallic jig head.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna put a little minnow on that, and just there'll be a little meat hanging out the back, but added bulk to it. And I think that's the way I'm gonna fish it first.
And it affects fall rate a little bit too.
Yeah.
Not quite as much as the Deep V Bucktail jig, but that hair or the flashaboo material, the mylar material is going to add some drag and make it fall a little bit slower than your standard jig. So
last year on the Rainy River, I actually had a couple of these. Charlie snuck a few out of the office, and we put on a paddle shad, eye candy paddle shad. And then we were using a fairly light size, but working it really slow. I mean, the water temps at that time weren't even 40 degrees, but the river had dirtied up. It was like the first or second day after one of the forks broke loose.
Yeah.
So with that added flash, I think it helped a lot compared to just a jig and a minnow or a jig and a paddle tail.
And we've been talking about the dirty water thing, but I totally forgot about another experience we had with it. Mike was cracking them on Mille Lacs with it that one day, and I don't think he was even using any bait or plastics with it. He was just casting it out and ripping it in and cracking fish off of it. So we were out working with some of the eye candy stuff last spring on Mille Lacs. I think it was that first week of opener, and we've been catching them really good on eye candy, and Mike just decided to tie one on and try it out. And first cast he got bit, and then I think within the next 5 he got bit again. And it was kind of towards the end of the day, but he caught a number of fish on it before we ended up leaving. So kind of that's outside my realm of where I thought this jig would be used, but super clear water. He had that moonlight glow color on. It's kind of a blue and white and silver, but yeah, he's cracking fish on that too. So I think, again, this dressed jigs platform is just increasing, and I think the opportunities are endless with it.
Sure.
Just anglers kind of got to break outside of their confidence stuff and play with it a little bit.
You think about what you just said, and we sat here talking about dirty water, but even in crystal clear water, if you get that blue moonlight, that white background and a little shimmer to it probably looks more like a spot tail shiner than you would think.
Yeah, for sure.
And guys really like the Deep V jig design. It's got that keel design you already talked about. So just offering more different options is really big. So like we also have another one, the Deep V Spin, that's got a willow blade underneath.
Yeah, and that one I've been using a little bit more. Again, it sits a little bit more in my confidence realm, but it was another really good one on Rainy Lake for us. That's where we first got out with it last year, is on Rainy Lake, and bro had it and he started just cracking fish left and right with it. But I think a cool thing about the Spin is it really affects the fall rate and the flash. It's got a couple features, but I think the biggest thing is you still have that heavy head to get to the bottom, but it allows that jig to kind of like coast and fall, just the added resistance the blade offers. So
the cool thing that I found that I like most about the Deep V Spin is the blade options. I mean, like you have your silver, your nickel, you have some gold, but then you have painted blade options. So kind of going back to dirty water or clear water, you can switch it up depending on, the fishery that you're at. I mean, you can use live bait on here, or you could use an eye candy paddle shad or an eye candy minnow. And that, that blade will really entice the bite.
Yep. You just got to fit the right, when you're using plastics with it, you got to fit the right plastics. Mm-hmm. Just so it doesn't come in contact with the blade. But like thinner bodied stuff like the eye candy minnow, the paddle shad works good. Just look how you rig it and give it a spin in the water. But yeah, I really like using it with plastics for sure. But live bait too, just tipping it and letting that live bait hang back a little farther.
Yeah, this one's going to be pretty versatile.
Yeah.
A lot of different places that you're going to want to try a Deep V Spin. I know last year we were filming a video on the Rainy River with Donnie, and he instantly, I brought those and he instantly tied it on. And the video, we weren't supposed to show the Deep V Spin yet, but he just kept catching them on it, so we were kind of hiding the Deep V Spin.
Yeah.
But he was either just casting it out at a 45 and letting it swing back in the current, or he would just cast it back there and just hold it, and we'd just move forward real slow.
Just let that blade just thump and flash.
And then he had a paddle shad on there as well.
I think another thing with the Deep V Spin is with forward-facing sonar, finding out that you a lot of times can just swim a jig over a walleye's head and they'll eat it just as good as fishing on the bottom. That adds a lot of action for swimming a jig. That's what bro was doing that one day too. We just got in a little current seam and he'd spot lock and he just put his live out there and would cast out and just drift it over their heads, and as it would come kind of over a little break, doink, boom, and he proceeded to catch about 15 before he told me and Joey what he was doing exactly. Because me and Joey were fishing on the bottom, not catching anything.
He doesn't exactly tell you what he's doing. We just kind of finally figured it out after he kept catching him and kept catching him.
I could see bro putting a night crawler or leech on there too. You wouldn't think of that, but he would.
Yeah, for sure. So.
And then Michael Showalter this winter on Pool 2, Mississippi, he's been catching
He's
him.
been cracking him on that?
He's been cracking him on the deep V spin. I think that color right there you got, Jace, is the one he's catching them at night.
Yep. That's the color Bro was using on the Rainy, too. So, yeah. So, that's Deep V family. We're really excited to keep on expanding on that. Of course, the regular Deep V jigs and bucktail are awesome, too. We're going to keep all that around, but just growing that. The next big addition...
One more thing about
Yeah.
the deep V's, we also got a couple added colors, some metallic colors.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Just in the normal deep V jig.
Yep. Yeah, we added a few metallic colors, and they look really good in there. We got a gold, a purple, an orange, and
Chartreuse.
Chartreuse. So, yeah, it looks really good at that big eye, and, yeah, it's a cool-looking jig. So, next, we have a little addition to the Tungsten family. So, when we first launched Tungsten, it was kind of new to the walleye world. There was a couple out there, but we were kind of the first custom designed one. There'd been some of those ones where the guys would take like a tungsten bass mold, public mold, and they'll put a walleye hook in it. But we were kind of the first ones to make a custom mold to design a walleye jig. So the molds are expensive. The material was expensive, and when we designed it, we were like, "Oh man, an 1/8 ounce tungsten is so small. Like, I'm not sure you need a 1/16." So we first launched it with 1/8 quarter 3/8, and it blew up like wildfire, bigger than any of our expectations. We knew like the top anglers would key in on it, but it seems like everyone has taken it, and even us too. Or I was kind of like, "Oh, I'm going to use a combination of." Some of the, other lead jig families we have and the tungsten. I've pretty much basically changed to 90% of the time fishing the tungsten jig.
Yeah, and it didn't take us long to figure out that we should get a 16th ounce.
Yeah.
We thought about it, and we got some samples in, and first time we saw those, we were like,
yeah,
give me those right now.
Basically, after we launched it and we saw that everyone was as excited about it as we were, we started working on that 16th ounce mold. So we have the 16th ounce tungsten. It's a little baby micro jig. It's got the same hook as the 1/8 in it. So in the short shank, it's a 1/0, I believe. And in the standard shank, that is a number 1. So decent size hook, but it's a nice little small profile. And guys are loving it again for pitching out minnows and kind of floating them over the tops of the heads. It's been huge on bobber rigs, but just super, super good jig. You guys were using it last spring a lot, right?
I was going to say, Charlie and I first experienced it on opening day, Minnesota fishing opener last year, fishing super shallow walleyes, anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. And Charlie actually figured it out first. He had a 16th tied on from the start. I had an 1/8. And the 1/8 was just too heavy. It just wouldn't hang up enough with a spot tail shiner, and I was too close to the bottom, and I think I was fishing below the fish. Charlie had the 16th ounce on and was catching them way better than I was. I finally had to switch and concede to him catching them on me, but that's the first experience I had with it. It was so nice for that shallow water. Put on a sizable minnow and just float it across a sand flat or even in the weeds. And then the next time we used it was middle of June probably. That was under a bobber with a leech.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the tungsten is, you can get that really small profile. And like you said, you still got the sizable hook for 25, 26 or bigger walleyes. And it worked just perfect for under a bobber with a leech or a night crawler.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely took us a while there on opener to get on some fish or catch some fish. Mm-hmm. And that 16th ounce really made a difference, just fishing it real slow, rod tip up, and just kind of letting the shiner do the work. Mm-hmm. With that little jig, it's not dropping as fast, and the minnow can kind of work around, swim around, and it definitely made a difference.
So when you think about that, like typically people go to tungsten, get a smaller profile, and still maintain your weight, right? Mm-hmm. Some of our bigger tungsten walleye jigs, lean more into how much you can feel, more of like a bottom contact deal, right? So you're pitching it, now you're dragging it across, and you can feel everything. But the other part of that, if you're just floating a 16th ounce jig, now you've got the smallest profile you possibly can, but you also have the feel that you wouldn't get with lead.
For sure. Yeah.
And I know Tom Wynn is another one who was really excited about this, and I think he fishes it in like fairly deep water sometimes. He's really big on getting the presentation to look as natural as possible, and a jig head doesn't exactly always look super natural. So the smaller, more compact profile he can get, he prefers. So he's throwing that, I think, even in like 20 feet sometimes, and just patiently waiting for it to get to the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah, some guys want to just get down to the fish as fast as possible. Tom, he's patient and wants to present the bait as natural as possible. So he's willing to, take the time to let that light jig fall down there in their face.
Yeah.
And it obviously works for him.
Yep, for sure.
Why don't we jump into the pinnacle of 2024 new products there?
Yeah.
You got, and it's not something that people haven't seen, but it is still the torch carrier for new products this year.
Yep.
Or this upcoming year.
The torch carrier. I like that, Joe.
So one of the biggest launches we've ever had here at Northland is the new eye candy. So what we ended up doing there is TPE's been a material that's been in the bass world for a while now, and it's a super awesome material. But on top of bass, I think it benefits the walleye angler more than anything. And some of those the tournament walleye guys have been using some of the other brands of TPE for a while, but we're like, we need to design some TPE products specifically for walleye fishermen.
Sam, before you go any farther, explain what TPE is.
Yeah, so TPE is thermoplastic elastopolymer, is the technical phrase of it. And basically what it is extremely stretchy, extremely durable, buoyant material. So it's super unique in that it doesn't get beat up. Its flexibility is off the roots. You can literally tie this thing into knots. And then on top of that, it's buoyant. It floats. So all those things make it perfect for walleye anglers. So you got the durability, facing with toothy fish. They're not going to tear this up. What we've heard stories of 100, 200 fish. I know I just kept one tied on like a crankbait last spring. Like I just tied one on, super glued it up there, and I just used it until a pike finally bit the jig head off. Like
I was going to say, most of the time you lose the whole jig and plastic before you lose the plastic. Or have to replace the plastic.
Yeah. So that's good, but really that's one of the lesser. The durability is not as important as the other things, because if this thing was not durable but caught as fish as well as it would, I would still use it. And where you really get the advantage is that durability equals into flexibility, and that flexibility turns into crazy action. You put this in the water and it just breathes. It moves. You can't get it to not stop moving. It's the closest thing to live bait you can get. On top of that, it's super buoyant, so it floats. So whether you're fishing on the bottom, it's going to stand that jig head up. If you're fishing it on a spinner rig, it's going to be like putting a worm blower in a night crawler. It stays off the bottom, and walleyes just seem to chow that. So, it is the best material to make walleye soft plastics out of, and we're kind of the first people to make plastics geared specifically towards walleye anglers to catch fish. And they catch walleyes, but they catch bass, they catch crappies, bluegills. They literally catch everything. It's pretty incredible. And this has been a 3-4 year process for this.
We've had them for a long time.
We started the conversation in 2020. Mm-hmm. And it's been a little bit to develop because it's the new material, and you just have to spend a little bit more time with that. Couple housekeeping things before we get into the story is we had to figure out how to store it. It reacts with other types of plastic, so you always want to store it in the original packaging it comes in, because if you put it with your other PVC style soft plastics, which is like your traditional stuff, like the old Impulse was and whatnot, it'll literally react with it and kind of turn sticky and gooey and kind of like melt together. It can happen with tackle boxes, all that stuff. So you want to keep it in the original packaging. We also had to adjust the formula a little bit. So ours shrinks. This material, if you leave it out, it shrinks. It can shrink. So we adjusted our formula so it shrinks to less than 10% of its original size. But some of the original ones we got in, it shrunk up to like I don't know, a tenth of its size. Like a 4-inch bait went to like a 1-inch crappie bait if you just left it outside the bag. So now we adjusted that. It holds up really good. Another thing is it doesn't maintain its shape. So some other brands of TPE, say it gets, we have these nice trays that it comes sitting in, but say you just had it in the bag and the swim bait tail folded itself over, they have some memory to it and hold it. And our material is really good at not retaining that memory. So even if it does get folded over, once you put it back, it's going to pop straight. So we spent a lot of time getting that material right and then working on the shapes. And we got a really good launch. So
yeah, getting the right shapes was definitely one of the biggest things that kind of took us quite some time, and we had to dial in the right shapes for the walleye angler. And I think
and size too.
I think that really, made a difference in its success in its launch.
Yep. So shape-wise, we have the paddle shad, which is 3.5 inches. It's got a little flat paddle tail on there. We have the minnow that comes in 2 sizes, 3 and 4. That's the one I had up. So here's the bigger minnow. Right here, there's the 4-inch minnow. That's the 3-inch minnow for those of you watching this on video. And then we have 2 night crawlers. So we got a 4.5-inch rig and night crawler. So this was developed to be pulled behind a spinner rig, but it also looks really, really good on a jig head too. And then we have the jig and crawler, which is 3.5 inches. That's meant to be put on a jig. So again, crawler body, but it's just a little shorter profile, stubby, so it rigs up nicely on a jig. Oh, and I almost forgot the 3-inch grub, that's kind of one of the...
It's the sleeper of
it's
all
the
of them,
sleeper.
I would
It's
say.
the all-around... it catches anything from a bluegill to
Crappie
to
walleye
a pike to a
on the
walleye.
bass.
Like, if you want to catch everything, tie on the grub, and you'll get bit on everything. So,
Yeah, the grub is just a straight fish catcher and definitely a sleeper out of the group.
yeah.
I mean,
Tom definitely one of Tom Wynn's favorites.
could you refer to it as like the all-around junkyard dog do-all plastic that
It could be
exists in
be
this
referred
line?
to as a
in the
all-around workhorse
Okay.
junkyard dog. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd probably put it like in the finesse category of that.
The nice thing about that bait is you put a 1/8 ounce or a 1/4 ounce jig head on it, and you can reel it so slow.
Yeah.
But that tail is just back there.
We talked about this material not stopping moving. The grub tail is like I describe it to people as it's an angel hair grub. Like it's not a big flapping grub like a lot of people are used to. This is a really kind of finessey grub, and it just looks like angel mermaid hair, whatever you want to call it, just flapping in the current with the jig, so it never stops moving.
Yeah, and all these shapes, you don't even have to put any action into it. It's moving, sitting still.
Yep.
Just in the water, sitting still. It's constantly moving.
Let's touch on a night crawler and jig crawler. Where application-wise, where are you going to use it? Obviously, with the night crawler and the jig crawler, we went with some of those natural colors.
Yeah.
There's a natural. There's some different core colors. Why don't you hop into night crawler and how it works on spinner rigs?
Yeah, so we've kind of known plastics have worked really well on spinner rigs for a number of years with our Impulse line. We had a leech and a night crawler in there. And it worked good, and it caught fish a lot of places. But it was, I think you were getting more bites off the spinner rig at that point. And the reason it kept working good is because fish couldn't pick you as easily. With the spinner rig, if you're pulling spinner rigs through perch or areas with perch and bluegill, you're going to be constantly putting on new night crawlers and dragging it around. You might be fishing for 10 minutes without realizing you got picked. This is tenfold of what Impulse was.
You will not get picked with this.
Yeah, you will never get picked with this. It floats, so it adds buoyancy to the rig. So I know like a big thing was fishing spinner rigs, especially if you're fishing with a beginner or if you're making a lot of turns around structure. You put this on with a butterfly rig and fish it with a bottom bouncer, so you're pretty much vertical, like a 45-degree angle. If you stall out around that inside corner, your bait's not going to fall to the bottom and get snags. And with a butterfly blade, it'll actually keep the bait off the bottom. So you could stall around the corner and still, like, I've got bit when I knew my bait was not moving down there. Yeah. It was just kind of hanging there. So, again, fishing with the young anglers where you're trying to get less snags and stuff, it works really good. Just the buoyancy factor together helps any angler because it gets off the bottom. And then the action this gives.
Yep.
Even pulled behind a little spinner rig, just the micro wiggles and whatnot. It's super cool. And another thing we can touch on with the spinner rig fishing is a lot of people like using live bait with spinner rig because they think it's a bug thing. They think it's a smell thing. You're searching for fish a little bit. Fish are following it. Eye candy's really good at absorbing scents. So any liquid or oil-based scent, it absorbs really well. We always recommend you test like one bait with your scent too, because there's some solvent-based scents out there that will like literally eat it up like it's the most powerful acid in the world. You drop it in there and you pull it out and your bait is gone to where you dropped it down to. So test your scent, but yeah, it works really well with scent too. So it's, again, basically like live bait. And another huge thing is bringing bait across the border into Canada has been getting harder and harder. Well, now I don't think you can bring any biologic material across the border. So you have to buy your bait in Canada, or you can buy this stuff and replace it with live bait. And I know in testing, we gave it to some old timers who have been pulling spinner rigs on Lake of the Woods forever and ever and ever. And they pull crawlers. It's just what they do. And even those old timers that you thought you would never get to change are like, hey, can we get some more of that eye candy? So it's been really, really good for that as well.
I also know that Hawthorne on Mille Lacs has been using the night crawler
6-inch
on a
version.
jig for walleyes and smallmouth on Mille Lacs.
And it looks really good.
Yeah.
Because it floats, obviously, it's going to stick straight up. And that's just, when it's on the bottom, you don't even have to jig or do anything. Yep. That tail is just so buoyant that it's moving more natural than it would be if you're, ripping it back to the boat or something like that.
I even sometimes like upsizing my jig because it has so much buoyancy towards it. I know one time I went to Mille Lacs last year and I was actually using a 3/8 ounce in like 10 to 12 feet of water just because I still wanted that reaction bite, and when it got to the bottom it floated off and it worked really good. I caught a ton of fish using the heavy jig in shallow water like that. But my favorite shape is probably the paddle shad. I don't know about you guys, but that's just my go-to. It seems to catch fish. You can put it, like I said, on a heavy jig and rip it, and you can put it on a light jig and float it.
Could you also drag it behind a spinner rig?
You could drag it behind. That's another sleeper one that the guys were dragging behind spinner rigs.
But so all this talk about spinner rigs, before I interrupt you anymore, it makes me think of a sneaky little tip. Can we do a sneaky tip of the day?
We can.
Let's go, Joe.
Words of wisdom from Joe.
Here's your sneaky tip of the day, okay? If you're pulling spinner rigs or cranks, works for both. When Sam talks about coming around corners of structure and how you your bait will almost stall out.
Yeah, the inside guy's bait will stall out and the outside guy's bait will speed up.
And you're getting bit on that. You're getting bit on that because you're changing your speed.
Yeah.
You're pulling that. Don't be afraid to throw it in neutral, slow way down, speed it up.
Drop your rod tip back.
Just don't sit there and expect that you're going to catch everything just pulling it at the same speed all the time. Pulling cranks, slap it into neutral, slow down, and all of a sudden the bait slows down, maybe starts to rise a little bit, and all of a sudden just whack. And there's your sneaky tip of the day.
Yep.
On to eye candy paddle shad.
That's one thing Eric Nag always taught me that I've kind of learned is at the time he was watching 2D because this was a number of years ago, but now I watch my side imaging and I figure out what the time frame is from when I see the fish on side imaging to when my bait's going to be rolling through there. And it takes a little bit of fiddling around, but it's pretty easy to figure out, if it's a 5-second count or whatever. But you see the fish, you wait your 5 seconds, and then you just drop your rod tip back a little bit, give it like a little bit of jig, and a lot of times, boom, they're on.
Doink.
Crappies and walleyes.
It's a good tip, Joe. I like it.
I like it.
Yep.
Eye candy paddle shad.
Back to the paddle shad.
So you can put it on a jig, obviously.
Yeah.
It's probably its prime configuration. You pull it behind a spinner rig if you really wanted to. But the thing about the paddle shad is it's thicker than the minnow, right?
Yep.
So it's going to be a little more buoyant, have a little more hang to it. You put that on like a 1/4 ounce jig, and you can run around and snap jig the whole lake. That thing's not coming off. It's not going to move. It's just going to look the same as how you rigged it. And it just flat out gets bit. You can fish it super aggressively. You could fish it real slow. Just slow roll it and just let that sucker wiggle.
Yeah. I think it really, like that fatter profile you talked about, I think it's like spot on to a spot tail shiner, no pun intended. I really like the gizzard shad color and the smoke shad color. For that reason, I think they look a lot like a shiner. Like, it's just my go-to. I have so much confidence in that thing. And that could be another thing we hit on, too, is the coloring of these baits.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a lot more colors in the paddle shad.
Yeah, the
Lots
paddle
of options.
I think the worms, it's like 8 in the crawler, and then all the other shapes have 12 colors, I believe. And the paddle shad has 18. So like a ton of colors in
A lot
that.
of options there.
But another advantage of TPE is the base uncolored version of TPE is almost crystal clear. Like, it looks like glass. So we're able to really create some cool colors of it using flecks and pearls, and the translucentness of it is better than anything you'd ever see. It's like eye candy, kind of. That's one of the reasons we called it that, is it just looks so good. So you get a lot of really natural colors, which we're finding is important for walleyes. Like, sometimes you got to match the hatch
For sure.
and be spot on, and sometimes you got to throw something bright and loud, like when you're in those dirty water situations and whatnot. But
last spring, Charlie and I ran up to Red Lake. We heard the bite was good, and we had shiners from the day before. Like, let's go up there. Never used a shiner all day. We put on MVP jigs, 1/4 ounce MVP jigs, and Charlie was using pink and I was using chartreuse, and it didn't seem to matter.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not familiar with Red Lake, it has a little bit of a dinge stain to it. It's not super clear, but we were in amongst a bunch of boats, and I mean, everyone was catching fish that day, but we didn't have any shortage of walleyes brought into the boat. It was actually super fun because we were a lot more efficient than everyone else.
Yeah.
Everyone else would catch one, run back to the live well, get another shiner on, catch one, run back to live well, get another shiner. Charlie and I would catch one, unhook it, let it go, and then we'd be right back in the water. We never went through a paddle shad except for when we got bit off by a pike.
Yeah.
yeah.
And we had 60 fish day.
Honestly, towards the paddle shad, the nastiest thing you can get into is sometimes the bluegills and the rock bass, since that tail is so thin and finessey, will pull that off. Like, that's the only time I've had to replace a paddle shad.
Yep.
And kind of a secret is you can fish with that without the tail.
That's right.
And it kind of turns into a little Ned rig.
Yep.
And it catches a lot of fish like that too.
Don't give up all the secrets.
Okay, I'll hold a little bit back, but that works really, really well.
You only get one sneaky tip per episode.
That's right.
We each get a sneaky tip, so we got 2 more to go.
Okay.
We know the Peterson boys aren't letting up too much.
Okay.
They got some derbies to win, so
Let's go on to the minnow.
yeah.
Minnow, 2 sizes. The person I think that likes that the most would be Nick Linder. He talks really highly of that bait. He loves to snap jig walleyes, especially in the spring. I think that's all he used last spring.
Yeah, I think there's 2. It seems like there's 2 type of guys out there. There's the paddle shad guys, and there's the minnow guys. And I was definitely a paddle shad guy, but I've been fishing with enough minnow guys that I finally gained the confidence in the minnow too. And it's just a confidence thing. They both catch them equally as good. And yeah, I think part of the minnow is that fast downfall. That's
For sure.
Allen thing of getting that bait to snap up and fall quickly, so you have nothing resisting it back. But yeah, the two sizes in there, and again, it imitates, a lot of the forage these walleyes key in on is 3 to 4 inch lures.
What's your experience with it, Joe? I know you've caught a few fish on this one.
My old pal, the eye candy minnow. What I found over the last year is just like with that paddle shad, obviously you can snap jig this bait really well. So the minnow may almost be a little more versatile than the shad. Because basically you can fish it on the bottom and snap it, you can drag it, it's still going to get bit that way. But for all you live scopers out there, this is your bait. For a majority of the year, you hook up one of those minnows on a 16th ounce jig, I mean, maybe an 1/8, depending on how deep you are, but throw it at your target and just kind of hover it right over the top of their head, and 80% of the time, they're just going to come up and crack it. Yeah. It's
too enticing not to eat.
Unreal, yeah. Right? And you just trying to float it over their head, obviously their eyes are kind of on the side, on the top of their head, right? So they can see up well. You think about ice fishing, they're always eating up. Yep. That's what they do. Now, you float this thing over its head and you're just kind of trying to hold it there. Well, just you holding it there, that tail just quivers. It just quivers. This is so soft of a material that you can't make it stop quivering. Whereas you could do the same thing with the paddle shad, but obviously it's not going to quiver quite as much. There's more material there. It moves a different way.
It's meant to move a little bit
right.
to get the paddling.
But, so that, you hover a minnow over them, and that thing just sits there and quivers. They can't not eat it. Yeah. It's insane.
So one thing I like to bring up is we keep bringing up these instances of our pro staff catching them on different areas and on different shapes. Well, we brought the eye candy, or we gave the eye candy out to all of our pro staff early in the spring. Yeah. And we just kept getting feedback from each of them, like they're catching fish like crazy on these shapes. And we thought about it a little bit, and that we're like, we need to bring these in as soon as we can, because we were catching them everywhere: Mille Lacs, Red Lake,
so kind of
Lake Bemidji.
Yeah, how the development process works is we will bring in 45 to 75 of each skew of a new skew in. So a skew would be like this smoke shad,
individual size,
glow fathead, grub. So we'd get 70 packs of this. So if you got 12 colors, it's a good sampling, and we use that to get out to our pro staff and whatnot. Well,
and that's why
get them away, and that's why
eye candy is probably the most well-known product in here, because it has essentially almost been out for a year now, but technically it's still a new product.
A limited availability early launch with some independent retailers and online.
Right.
But this year we'll have the grand scheme of things, and you'll be able to find it almost everywhere. Because it was kind of cool opportunity too. Because again, a new product, not everyone takes it, but that limited launch gave us a sales forecast, and the people who didn't take it, we kind of called up and said, hey, you need to really reconsider this and put it in. So we got really good placement on it. Good quantities are coming in, so you should be able to find it hopefully everywhere this summer, and hopefully it doesn't sell out too fast. Last year it was like a hot commodity for us. We were just
all of a sudden they were mostly gone, and we had some here, a small amount, and we were getting, hey, can I get a couple more of these? Yeah. And we maybe hand them like 1 or 2 packs, but that's the thing, you can survive.
One pack goes a long way.
Yeah, you can survive a long time with 1 pack. Yep. One thing I wanted to bring up is, so Jace's brother, he went to the Boundary Waters, and he was gonna do a bunch of activities, but he thought about maybe doing some fishing. Well, we're like, hey, just take this pack of eye candy and a couple of jigs, and you're gonna be fine. You're not gonna run out of plastics if you're fishing for a couple hours. It's just perfect for putting a pack in your pocket, and you can catch a couple fish and not worry about bringing live bait or anything like that.
Yeah.
1 pack of paddle shads lasted them 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah. No, let's talk a little bit about using plastics for walleye fishing. Like it's a little bit of a challenge to force yourself to do it. There's a lot of guys who haven't done it yet. I know I was lucky to learn from guys like Tony Roach and Brad Hawthorne on Mille Lacs, and kind of at first I gained a lot of confidence on Mille Lacs, that reaction bite, and Mille Lacs fish eat plastics, but Bemidji fish, I'm like, I don't know if Bemidji fish eat plastics, and then I started doing it more and more, and it's like walleyes eat plastics anywhere, and sometimes they eat plastics better than live bait.
For sure.
But I think a nice thing about eye candy is it's a perfect crossover bait for using that, because eye candy's the first, when I first started doing it on Mille Lacs, it would be rip jigging, heavy jigs, snapping it, like
reaction bites,
getting a little bit of drag to pull out as you're jigging it.
Yeah, you kind of almost don't want them to get a good look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Eye candy, I literally sometimes slow it down and fish it like I'm fishing a jig and a shiner. And I didn't toy a lot around with it with the traditional PVC stuff, but it's a bait that, again, traditional PVC, old school, if you can call it old school, walleye fishing plastics, you set the hook immediately. Eye candy, you can get them to walk away with it a little bit,
like you would with a jig and shiner,
or like you would bass fishing a plastic. Yep. Like they'll eat it, and I think part of it's so scent free, it's so soft and feels natural. They'll bite it, and you can feed it to them, a little bit, not as much as live bait, but a little bit, and drill it. Or you actually could if you wanted to. It's just not necessary. Like I've had fish swim away with it and seen how long they'd hang on to it, and they'll hang on to it. So whether you're trying to trigger that reaction bite, or just put it on and fish it like a jig and minnow, like it's a really good plastic to start practicing that. And you just gotta put in some time,
right?
Try it in different scenarios, but you're gonna get bit by walleyes using plastics.
The best place to do it would be this coming spring. Walleyes are feeding. Usually you're fishing sizable schools. Catch a few on your jig and minnow, and then put on the eye candy minnow or the eye candy paddle shad, and gain confidence in it.
Exactly, and you'll catch them. I know. One of the deal breakers for me was a few years ago. We just got eye candy samples in. We were out trying to get some photos. I had a handful of shiners in the boat, and the guy I was fishing with, we started getting on fish pretty good, and it was like running out of shiners. So I was like, okay, I'll save the shiners for him, and I'll put on this. And I actually started catching him better on the eye candy than the shiners. So that was like the breaking point for me, and that was still early in the season, coldish water. And they were eating it really, really good.
Yep.
So one shape we haven't talked a lot about yet is the jig crawler.
Eye candy jig crawler.
It's a super versatile shape, and also a great shape for something new coming into the walleye world, which is Ned rigging walleyes.
Dun, dun, dun.
Have you been Ned rigging some walleyes recently, Joe? Last year?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
Me personally,
You kind of did.
I guess I kind of did on accident.
Unintentionally, but it worked. You caught two. You're trying to catch bass, and you caught two walleyes before you caught.
It did. What people are starting to find out, right? You've got the Ned rig, which is essentially just a do-nothing, stand-up on the bottom jig that you kind of drag, right? Popular in bass fishing for the last few years, for a while. And people just started realizing, geez, I catch much walleyes. And I had the light bulb moment myself last year, trying to catch bass. You're catching walleyes. Well, if you think about it, predator's a predator. Obviously, they do things a little differently. But this is almost like another sneaky little tidbit, right? Ned rigging for walleyes is basically a thing now. Might not be mainstream, but all those guys are doing it, or at least they think about it. They entertain the idea of doing it. And what the eye candy jig crawler gives you is the perfect platform to do that for walleyes. So instead of just taking the exact same bass bait that you go and chuck around trying to catch smallmouth, you rig it up with the eye candy jig crawler, and now you have more of a crawler profile and action. Whereas, in the past, maybe you threw like half a crawler on a jig or something and kind of drag that around midsummer instead of just pulling spinner rigs all the time. Well, now you can do it endlessly, weeks on end. Hook one of these bad boys up, catch them for the whole month of July.
The eye candy works really nice on a Ned style type of jig head. Northland offers a Nedster and a weedless Nedster. The eye candy jig crawler has kind of a blunt end to it, so it butts up really nice to those mushroom style type jig heads. With a size 1 or 1/0 hook works perfect for those applications.
One of the cool things about the night crawler and the jig crawlers, you got the core shot colors, and those have been some of the favorites from the anglers, like this green with the purple inside, and then we have like the natural
cores.
That one was
that's like
that seemed to be everyone's favorite.
It's kind of like a bass peanut butter and jelly, where it's got like a natural crawler outside core, and then the inside is purple, so it kind of looks like dark and black from below, but if you like look up into it in the light, like what the fish would see, you see that like purple just shines bright, and it's really fluorescent, and so that's cool.
And we're looking at the same thing here as we are with the grub and the minnow, right? If you connect this to a Ned rig and you're just dragging it along the bottom, you don't have to really move the bait very much to get that tail to just sit there and quiver. So it's going to be standing up on the bottom, and the tail's just going to quiver, just like the minnow and the grub. So soft, so lifelike that it will not stop moving.
And like we know from bass fishing, sometimes lack of action is more important in this technique than action. So just drag it and just keep the rod there.
Making it move without making it move.
Yeah, for sure. Like bass fishing around with Neds and stuff, most of my accidental walleye catches during bass fishing, I'd say 90% or more have been on Ned rigs. Like you can catch, and I always try to do the slam when we're out in the boat and see how many species you can catch on a Ned, but it catches them all. But for sure, the walleyes like eating the Ned.
Oh yeah. Another thing the jig crawler and the other shapes are real good for is drop shotting. Yeah. And that's another thing that's gained popularity for walleye fishing. But, the jig crawler is perfect drop shot bait.
Perfect.
And
that's like a huge point that all these bass tactics are just catching on in walleye. And the thing about eye candy is it's so buoyant and flexible. Not every shape works great on a drop shot, just because that tail just wants to float up. But the bulbousness of the body and kind of how the rib and the tail is teed out, it's a shape that doesn't just want to kink up in a U. We thought the night crawler, the 4.5-inch night crawler, would be a killer drop shot, but it's not that great. If you keep it moving, it works. But if you just let it sit, it just kind of folds up in half or follows straight up the line. It's too buoyant. So you got to have a shape that's got a little bit of rigidity to it. And the jig crawler is cool. Another thing, kind of all the eye candy, you can do little modifications to trim it, but especially the jig crawler, is it's got this split tail. And
you stole my sneaky tip of the.
Oh, did I? Day. Okay. Well, we can talk about it together, but you sometimes almost need a scissors. But if you rip it apart here, that tail sits into a little V split tail, and that looks super good on the bottom. Just changes the overall look of it, and more of like a minnow split tail, even like a little craw, legs hanging up. So little modifications like that are.
Yeah, we're actually learning more and more about the eye candy plastics, like different ways that we can utilize them and fish them, since we first got them. And that's a thing that we've been seeing some of the pros do too. Bro, he'll send us a picture of one of our eye candy plastics, and it doesn't quite look like it did when it came out of the package, but he said this is working for me. So we're not we're all for that. If you can make a modification to it, the plastic itself can it doesn't hold memory, and you can cut it up, change it, and like you said, if you're paddle shad, like if somehow the tail snaps off or breaks off, you can just save that to use as a Ned, or just keep fishing like it is.
Yeah, it works as a super super good Ned. So yeah,
but so you're talking about all like new techniques to the world of walleye fishing, relatively new techniques, like things that haven't been commonplace for forever. But there's absolutely no reason that you can't strap that onto just your classic regular old round ball jig.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Send it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're still gonna get bit just the same.
Yep.
So it's not, there's fun, sneaky little new things that are hip or getting hip, but you replace your half of a crawler with that, not getting your crawler's stolen by perch. You can fish all day.
Yeah. Let's as we wrap up eye candy kind of all together, let's talk a little bit about a few rigging tips we've learned. Just some stuff because the material it's different. It's like super stretchy. So let's just run through that before we run into some of the other products. But I think one thing, since eye candy is so stretchy, you almost have to rig it past where you want to get a good rig. Like that was one thing we get from a lot of people is, it's kind of hard to rig. So what we like to do is push the hook point in, have the plastic pop out where you want it to pop out, and then you're almost going to pull on the front of that plastic and like snap it. Like literally try to pull and stretch that plastic around the jig head. And that'll help it shim up nice to the jig, and it'll look really good, and it'll stay on forever then.
But now also, Sam, if you do not have a lot of experience rigging soft plastics, the first thing that's going to make your life a little easier is you take that soft plastic, lay it along the shank of the hook, about where it would line up with the head, and then you can kind of picture, you can see where the hook shank should be coming out, and then you aim for that as you come through the bait.
It definitely takes some getting used to, but the sweet thing about these eye candy shapes is if you mess up the first time, the second time, the third time, the plastics, it's not going to change. Just you have as many chances as you need
to get it right. Like old school plastics, regular plastic formula. Sometimes with a very soft bait, you mess that rigging up once, and you've now ruined.
Done it so many times.
Yeah.
But eye candy you can rig up. Just keep poking holes in it, and it'll be just fine.
Sam, you kind of talked about how you want to snap it onto the jig head. This material doesn't work very well if you have, say, a barb, like a wire or a plastic keeper. If you keep pushing, it doesn't necessarily go up like regular plastic, PVC plastic. That's where Sam is referring to that snap.
Like pulling it down and pulling it around, pulling it past. And then one thing we all really like to do, and it'll help with the longevity of it, is super glue. Just keep a little super glue in your boat and add a little dot up by the jig head or on the bait collar, and that thing literally turns into a lure. Like, you will not have to replace it until a pike bites it off. So,
yeah, it's definitely a good addition. I honestly haven't used super glue like ever, so it's not really necessary.
I haven't either.
It's really not necessary. Like, you get it on there and it's gonna stick.
It'll still stick longer than your traditional plastic, but if you do add a dab of super glue,
it won't get pulled down.
It won't get pulled down, and you have seriously extended the life of your plastic.
And that's a good point, Charlie. That you don't need super glue to keep your bait on. Like, very rarely do they pull the whole bait off, but sometimes they do the little pull down, and you gotta fix your plastic and shim it back up. I like using super glue. But another thing is jig collars. So the tungsten jig collar is dynamite on this TPE just because its sharpness and it's got a little bit of width to it. It really helps hold it on. Wire collars work good too if you get that snap on, but like Jace said, they're a little bit harder to rig, so you have to do it. But pretty much any collar works good. But we find the tungsten, the wire, and the Smeltinator work really, really well for that.
Yeah, the double barb keeper on the tungsten jig seems to be the best for the eye candy.
That's one that I don't usually use super glue with.
Yeah.
Just because it holds it up good enough. So
let's go on to something else. Let's go on to a little more reaction where you do need to rip it a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Next walleye. Joe? This is kind of your bait, I feel like. This is one that you've played around with a little bit.
Some people know that I really enjoy what you would call, some people would call it a glide bait. Some people would call it some sort of a rip bait. But you're talking, now we have another one that is maybe not necessarily brand new to everyone. This was an early launch this fall. It is the Pitchin Puppet. So this is an overhauled version of our classic puppet minnow. Now,
Meant for casting and retrieving.
Right, meant for casting and
Or
retrieving.
not meant, designed for. Does everything.
Can be fished vertically,
Yep.
like your classic jigging style puppet minnow, but was really designed to be casted and snapped.
Yep.
Now, what you have here is an oversized back hook. How much bigger do you think that is, Sam?
Significantly. Twice as big.
Significantly larger back hook and no front hook.
Yeah, the puppet minnow hooks is I feel like it just hasn't been. So it was originally developed as a vertical jigging lure in Europe, and then kind of came over here at the ice fishing market. But that style of lure has always been designed towards vertical, and it's custom hook in it that only a handful of manufacturers make, and no one's really designed a new, better hook for it. So it just kind of been what's available. So we took it, built a new hook for it, kind of just designed everything for this new technique of casting and retrieving these lures. But like Joey said, it works great vertical jigging too.
Yeah, and it's not really a new technique. Obviously, it's people have been catching them on these style lures for a while, but we just wanted to, design one that was, for pitching.
Tell us about the body here, Sam.
Yeah, so the overall details of this, like Joey said, got a massive back hook, no front hook, again, because we designed it to be casted and retrieved, so you're going to be ramming it into the bottom, so no front hook on there. The treble hook actually has like a little raised fin. Big problem with these style of baits is sometimes the treble hook likes to loop up and catch on the backside of the jig or catch over the line, so that little fin helps it track in the water, but it also prevents that treble hook from getting caught and tangled. And then the meat and potatoes of the whole thing is it is a resin overmolded body. So the whole thing, like our glass buckshot spoon, is encased in this resin material. And that gives you a few different things. I think it gives it a really cool kind of that semi-transparent bait fish look. It looks like a minnow does. It kind of has that three-dimensional feels and textures to it. B, it makes them extremely, or protects the paint. A lot of times you're fishing this around rocks and whatnot and bashing it into the ground. Like, you won't chip the paint. Like, they actually get a little foggy when they get scratched up, just because they get scratched up. But as soon as you put that in the water, that fog goes away. But the biggest thing is, when casting and retrieving these things, guys were constantly breaking off the tails in the rocks. It's just been a customer service challenge we've had forever. We've built the original puppet minnow as strong as you can without sacrificing action, but that little ABS tail the puppet minnow has, it's just, if you bounce it into rocks long enough, it's going to break. So, it's just glued on, and it's light plastic, and it's going to break.
And that's been one of the major downfalls of that design for forever.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a puppet minnow, a jig and wrap, it doesn't matter. All those tails are just glued on.
Yeah.
And obviously glue is always going to have some sort of a breaking point. And these baits, you probably fish harder than anything else that you have. It's a big piece of lead. You're moving it fast. Yeah. It's crashing into the rocks. And the tails...
Your bites are aggressive.
Right.
They're grabbing it right away.
And
so
those other designs weren't designed to do that. And that's why the tails aren't going to hold up. Mm-hmm. And these... you can just bash on the rocks in the bottom all day long and catch fish, and the tail's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and it's like I said, so it's overmold. So the tail is part of the body, and I think that resin material is a lot tougher than the ABS plastic too. But also, we don't sacrifice any action. So, some other manufacturers out there have put metal ones in, and it just messes up the balance of these things. You got to have that weight forward design, so this thing tumbles and rolls when you snap jig it. So we've had it, testing 2 years. Last summer, there was a good handful out in the marketplace, and I've yet to hear anyone break one yet. That's probably, I just jinxed myself. Someone's going to go throw it in the rock. But no, they're super, super tough. So
yeah.
And we sold these on the website last year, had a limited run in again.
Early release in September, I believe, end of October.
How quick did we sell out? Wasn't it like a record?
Yeah,
It was,
they basically all moved in a week.
4 days.
So
let's say the majority of like the good SKUs, the good colors and sizes went over the weekend, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing, obviously, if you look at this bait, the first thing you notice, huge hook, right? And then an overmolded resin body. But one other thing is that's an eye catcher right off the bat. When you put that resin over, like metallics especially, it just pops.
The cosmetics are really, really good.
Like, it is beautiful looking. And then the resin also gave you the ability to have multiple different colored tails. Here, Charlie's got a pink tail.
Yep.
This is green. So depending on the color pattern, you also have tipped tails, which typically you never saw before. It was always just clear plastic.
And these things got a crazy action to them. Like, they're...
It's a different action than the puppet minnow, but
different,
it's a good different.
You notice that you actually don't need to snap it as hard or jig it as hard because it's going to fly left and right.
And they have a little bit more of that belly roll. Like our puppet minnow kind of scoots side to side. And I think that's like a really good crayfish imitator when it scoots side to side like that. But this thing, when you rip it, it comes and it rolls the belly. So I think you get a little bit more of that dying minnow. You also get that contrast flash. So, this one, kind of a glow chub color, orange back, white bottom. As you rip it, that white belly flares and flashes. So I think that's a triggering factor for sure too. But fun story about this, when we got the first ones in, got like a handful and like a dozen. And I gave one to Bro and I said, hey, go test this out for me. Let me know what you think. And, this is like one of 5 at this point, like really early on in the development cycle. And so I can only give a handful out because if you lose them, we got nothing to compare it to, no reference or whatnot. So Bro went out there and fished it, and he's like, I was catching a lot of fish on it and being good and careful with it, but finally a pike bit him off. And for like the next 2 or 3 weeks, he kept calling me. He's like, hey, and usually like he can find something that they're biting on. Like he just can catch him. He could catch him on a piece of bread for what we know. But he kept calling me. He's like, hey, do you get some more of those yet? And when he starts calling me and asking for more of a new thing, then I know it's going to be a really, really good fish catcher because I know he needs it. He doesn't want it. He needs it back. So
yeah. We talked about how these were released last fall and they sold well last fall, but they are available now in 3 colors, a bunch of different, 3 sizes, excuse me, a bunch of different colors. That middle size would probably be the most popular walleye size, at least for the guys, in the upper Midwest.
Yep, and that's the 5/8 ounce size. We also have a 5/16, which is just above a quarter, and then a 1 ounce, a big dog out there. So kind of all the sizes fit in the walleye realm of things. And again, they're just a good reaction bait. So we're excited for them. Segueing to reaction baits, we got another fun little one, is our new micro rumble bugs. So this is kind of an opportunity we had with our balsa development of these rumble bugs, which has been in the Northland lineup since we started selling cranks, I believe. We have a smaller body of them. So we actually have a 3 centimeter body and a 2.5 centimeter body. So it's the size 3 and 2. And they are just fun little fish catchers. That's
exactly what they are. They're fish catchers.
Yeah, like you just tie them onto a spinning rod and go. You can beat around the bank, off the dock, in a little boat, in a big boat, and they just catch everything from giant bass to bluegills, crappies.
They're going to be a sneaky walleye bait, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Imagine like small bait fish, even on lead core.
Yeah, lead core, for sure. And a cool thing about them is they run, a lot of times when you get little baits like that, the action suffers. And when we first got them, I was amazed because you could not burn them out. You can reel as fast as you want to, and that thing runs and tracks good. So it's really cool. So we got 2 sizes of that. They all come in these little 3 packs, sold on our website. exclusively right now. We might get them into some retailers, but you can find them on our website. And then we got a few different color combinations. So we got kind of a trout combination, which these are great little stream trout bait. They only dive, I think the 3 dives 2 feet. Yeah, 2 feet, and I think the other, the 2.5 is somewhere around there too. So we got a trout color, a dirty water color, and a clean water color. So kind of trout patterns, brighter patterns for dirty water, and the natural patterns in that. So it's a cool little bait and fun for kids, fun for everyone, fish catcher. So
That's one of those ones you either give it to your niece or your nephew, your own child, let them go chuck around with it. But at the same time, you keep one of those tied up in your car at all times.
Yeah.
You drive by a little creek, a little river, you got an extra minute, why not? See if there's anything here.
That's right.
Yeah, I love using it in the kayak. So, and then in addition to that panfish, we have these new Tungsten Crappie Kings jigs, which are custom designed tungsten jigs for crappie fishing. So basically what we did is we took something very similar to our Firefly and Gypsy jig and made it tungsten, put the right custom sized hook in there. And it's another thing that there's a few kind of garage shop deals out there and some other people doing it, but it's kind of surprisingly an untouched market of the specialized tungsten jigs for open water fishing.
Right.
You know, we got a ton of it in ice, but these are for open water. So they got a little bigger hook gap, a little bigger hook in them. Sizes are 16th and 8th on them. Just awesome. And I used them quite a bit last year, and they are so nice for fishing down a deep weed line because before we had to wait forever for a little 16th to get down there. Now the profile of an 1/8 ounce or the profile of a 16th ounce is now available in an 1/8 ounce. And I've honestly found times where it's too heavy and I got to go to that smaller profile and the 16th. So we have it in a plain version to add your favorite bait or soft plastic to. And then we also have it in a dressed version with some feathers and some flash on there. So super cool.
It's exciting because this year, the ice season, I mean, we're at the middle of February, beginning of February here, and the ice season almost seems like it's close to the end.
It's crazy.
But we're going to get a panfish season this year before, Minnesota Walleye opener or the other states that have a walleye season open. I'm excited to get in some shallow water bays with the Tungsten Crappie King.
For sure. And under a bobber too. Yep. Like, you always struggle with getting that jig to stand up good. Like under a bobber, that's going to be really good. And on top of that, another killer bobber one's going to be the flat fry fly, which is the 16th ounce flat fry jig, and it's tied up with a hackle collar and kind of a pipe cleaner body and a little feather tail. So that's going to be a killer
for sure.
Killer under a bobber jig comes through.
And that's
Spring
tungsten.
bluegill killer.
Yeah, for sure. So
these are labeled as Crappie Kings, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to catch bluegills or whatever.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. Things are come early. One of you said they're open water fishing in South Dakota already, in lakes too.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. So we're up here, northern Minnesota. We got a bit of ice left, but as you go south, it looks worse and worse.
Lake Minnetonka.
Yeah.
Lake Minnetonka.
I might be traveling south.
That's right.
Go pick up my boat and
Don't forget about all my perch freaks out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
The Tungsten Crappie King jig
Be a
is
perch
a
killer.
Killer little perch jig.
You know where else I see it working too is the trend of using larger tungsten jigs for ice walleye fishing.
For sure.
Like waxies and whatnot.
Yep.
So it's going to work really good there. And I imagine you could catch them.
This Tungsten Crappie King jig, the undressed version, reminds me of a lot of that short shank tungsten jig where Joey made a good point. Perch fishing, put a fat head on that, and that would be
killer
dynamite for perch fishing.
You've now got a 1/8 ounce jig option that is the size of a 16th. So you can cast it easy. You can feel it still. And all you got to do is find your school of perch, bomb one out there, doink.
Which you might be doing a lot of perch fishing this spring too, along with the crappies.
We have a early ice off.
It might be a ways till the crappies move up in the shallow, so it'll be cool. All right, moving on. another big, exciting new platform we have is Smeltinator. And I might give this one to Jace. Do you want to kind of take it away of how the Smeltinator came to be a Northland product?
Yeah, so the Smeltinator isn't necessarily a new jig design by any means. It was actually released back in 2007 by a company that Brian Gustafson created called Bass Tactics. Brian Gustafson, Jeff Gustafson, Gussie, no relation there, but very good friends. Both live in Kenora. And then as long as John Peterson, they were fishing these Canadian bass tournaments, Lake of the Woods, Rainy Lake. And at the time, the smelt were so prevalent in the lakes that that's how all the tournaments were being won. So they needed a jig that, looked like a smelt. At the time, there really wasn't a minnow jig out there. The Mimic minnow jig was probably the closest, but that had a little less of a wire gauge of a hook.
Yeah, just a standard like walleye, probably a mustad walleye hook.
Perfect for walleye fishing, lighter line, but these, the tournament guys wanted just a little bit heavier gauge hook for 4 to 5 pound smallmouth. And Brian actually reached out to John asking him for tips and tricks how to go about making his own jigs, building relationships with manufacturers. And John helped him out along in that process, and that's how the Smeltinator came about. Now the Smeltinator has won Elite Series events, Bassmaster Classics, Open events, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in Canadian tournaments.
All the Canadian events.
Yeah. But now Northland actually purchased the distribution and manufacturing rights this past January, or that's when we started create, right?
But we've been working on it since July.
Correct. Yes. So now Northland is manufacturing the Smeltinator, and what that's going to do is we're not changing the design, we're not changing the hook, colors staying the same. The only thing that's going to change about it is they'll be more readily available to consumers.
I guess we didn't change anything, but one thing to say is we've dialed in the QC a little bit better. So the Smeltinator had kind of gone through a couple different manufacturers and whatnot, and the shape had changed slightly just because, redesigning molds and whatnot. But when we purchased it, we were really careful to make sure to bring it back to the original design.
Yep.
It's the one Brian and Jeff prefer.
Yep.
So it might look a little bit different, but that is the original Smeltinator design. And we've been working on it nonstop since July to get it right and be able to get it available for sale here.
Yeah, it's the way that they want it.
Yep.
Exactly.
And a lot of that design is a little bit of cosmetics, but it's balance is like the biggest thing.
Right.
When Gussie's doing that moping technique, I don't know what it is about this, but it hangs perfect wherever it is in the water column. It seems
and that's the biggest deal about it.
You cast it out and it rides like this. You fish it vertical, it sits vertical. Like it never does that typical jig head nosedive and whatnot. It just kind of swims through the water like a smelt.
Right.
So,
in the past, the Smeltinator has really only been available at Lake of the Woods Sports headquarters.
Yep. Handful at
Tackle Warehouse
and
but
Omnia,
mostly available just in Canada. So, in 2024, you'll start to see them show up in more retailers. They're available on our website. They're popular, so you might see some sizes and colors out of stock already, but we're bringing them in weekly. So the stock will change on that, as the season progresses as well.
And it's a tournament. It's designed with the tournament angler in mind. So one cool thing about the Smeltinator that is abnormal of any other jig Northland produces is you can buy an 1/8 ounce in a 1/0 hook, and you can buy an 1/8 ounce in a 5/0 hook.
Correct.
So there's a ton of different combinations based on the weight you want and the size bait you're using. That I think it's over 600 SKUs or something like that.
It's a lot of SKUs.
It's a lot of SKUs. So we're making sure we're going to bring everything in, and then we're going to have a really, really good stock of those key SKUs. The ones that Gussie likes to use, that he's won the classic with, those 2 and 3/0 hooks, and I think
there's basically
3/8 and halves are the
quarter and 3/8 are the most popular in a 2/0 and 3/0 hook.
Yeah.
And just for a little background history of hook sizes, if you're not familiar, 1/0 is smaller than a 5/0.
Yep.
But then it actually changes. So a number 1 is bigger than a number 2.
A number 1 is smaller than a, a number 1 is bigger than a number 2.
Correct.
So it kind of goes up until you hit 1, and then when you hit 1/0, it starts, or I should say, it goes down until you hit 1, and then when you hit 1/0, the numbers start working up.
Correct.
So
yep.
Yeah.
So the 1/0 hook would work really well in your 2.5-inch baits, plastic baits.
We put a 1/0 in the Nedster.
Yep.
And stuff. And it's like a good Ned style.
Correct.
Bait.
1/0 works well in the 2.5-inch baits. Gussie and other anglers primarily use the 2/0 and 4-inch baits. 3/0 for 4.5-inch style baits, and then that 4/0 and 5/0 into 5, 6, and even 7-inch baits. Yep. Just to help clarify with the size hooks.
Yeah, and two, if you want to, a lot of people ask like, what would normally be? So in an 1/8 ounce jig designed for walleye and bass, we would normally put a number 1 in that. In a 1/4 ounce, we'd put a 2/0, and a 3/8 ounce, we'd put a 3/0. So that's kind of how that falls if you're looking for what's normal.
Yeah. So there's basically a Smeltinator for any scenario.
Any scenario.
Pretty much, yeah. 1/8, 1/4, 3/8, and 1/2 ounce sizes. So you have 4 different weights, 5 different hook sizes, a bunch of colors. We have, natural colors, minnow style colors, but there is some walleye colors in there as well. Chartreuse, oranges.
So designed for the bass tournament guys, but it's also a great walleye jig.
Correct.
And works great with eye candy.
Yep.
Where do you start in deciding like what size you need?
So it's
Is
got to
it
be
the weight
plastic,
or the
right?
size hook?
The bait that you want to use would be where you would start.
I would, honestly, if you're new to the whole Smeltinator thing, we offer kits on the website. That'd be your number one thing to do. Purchase a kit. You're going to have an array of sizes, weight sizes. You're going to have an array of hook sizes. And you're going to figure out what is going to work best for you. To start off with one, I'd get a 1/4 ounce in a 2/0 hook size. That's probably the number one size combination. And then pick your color to match up with your favorite plastic.
So if you're out fishing and you're trying to pick which one you need, are you basing it off of the weight or the hook size?
I'd first go with weight, just based off of how deep you're fishing. Yes. And then whatever plastic or, size of profile of the bait fish that you're trying to match up with, then I would pick the hook size based on that.
Right.
Yep. It's a little confusing, but just keep in mind.
Once, like Jace said, the kit would be an awesome thing. And once you get a few in your hand, you look at them and you're like, yep, that's the exact size you want.
Yep.
So
along with the Smeltinator, we got the Smeltinator Underspin. And that is a product that they've been using for a while, but hasn't been available.
Yeah, I got a little background story from Brian about the Underspin. And he said, we've had it for about 6 years, but we haven't made any sold any to the public for about 2 years. They dominated some tournaments across Canada with it. And the one thing that makes this Underspin a little different than what else is out there is most of them are geared towards largemouth fishing, where they have kind of an oversized hook, 4, 5/0, even 6/0 hook for big swim baits, a bigger blade on them. And what that bigger blade does is actually makes the bait rise. The nice thing about the Smeltinator Underspin is it has a downsized blade. It's actually like 2 sizes smaller than other underspins on the market. And what that does is you're able to fish this Underspin deeper than most others on the market. It's available, same thing, in all those different hook sizes. 3 weights in this one. It's not offered in 1/8, but 1/4, 3/8, and 1/2. So you can put a 2.5-inch paddle tail on this, fish it in 30 feet of water for suspended smallmouth, walleyes. One thing that Brian kind of dubbed it as, and I think it's pretty smart, is it's his pocket-sized A-rig. There's pocket A-rig.
Yeah.
So pocket Alabama rig, which is super popular in bass fishing. It's a bait that has usually 5 different paddle tails on it and a bunch of blades. It looks like a school of bait fish. Now that it's been out for a while, fish are starting to get accustomed to that.
The A-rig.
The A-rig,
yep.
Correct. And this bait is a little finessey version of that. It's only got 1 blade, 1 paddle tail, and those fish that used to eat the A-rig really well are biting the underspin.
Another thing we should hit on too, and I don't even know if we talked about that much talking about Smeltinator, but the quality components in it. So we're keeping all the Gamakatsu 604s in there. It's like the best.
It's the tournament grade
bass hook. So it's not like a beefy bass hook, but it's not like a light wire walleye hook. Like it can still penetrate well on light braid and light line.
Yep.
But it's going to hold up to really big fish. The points are super extra sharp. I always joke that we should do a promotion of a free pack of Band-Aids with every pack we sell, because when I'm messing around with these things in the office, they are constantly poking and pricking me, like super, super sharp hooks. And then they're ultra strong. So which is what Gamakatsu kind of prides their company on, is they have the best steel wire for strength and flexibility. They have a proprietary sharpening system, and it just makes a dynamite lights out hook. So with the underspin, along with the Gamakatsu 604, it has a Spro swivel on it.
Yep.
And a lot of people say, it looks like you put too big of a swivel on it, but Brian and Jamie messed with a lot. I think they said they tried every swivel combination in the book, and that Spro swivel in that size was super, super important to get the blade spin they want. So Spro swivel, Gamakatsu hook,
that blade spins as soon as, you barely have to start moving, and that blade will start spinning super slow speeds. The underspin is a awesome cold water lure to throw, and bass might be a little bit more lethargic. I keep bringing up bass, but this bait works for walleyes too. Yeah,
I think you'd be able to catch good under the ice with it.
I think that's actually a little Lake Winnipeg secret.
Yeah, I actually caught a couple of this a couple days ago on Winnipeg.
The underspin you're using? Okay.
Yeah.
And we do have a color that's for
Lake Winnipeg. Big windy. Yep.
So, Smeltinator is going to be an awesome platform. We have big visions for it, and we think it's going to go really big. And then finally on the bass thing, and I think this wraps up all of our products, is marabou. So another Canadian secret, which isn't really secret anymore, but 15, 20 years ago, probably even more than that now, the Canadians started tying these marabou jigs. I think they got it from the fly guys.
First started fly, but also crappie jigs.
Okay.
Guys were catching them on black crappie jigs. But the problem was the hook was so small that that's when they started tying their own.
So they started tying their own, kept it secret for a while. Then the word got out, but it's always had manufacturing struggles. Big companies like us, previously, we actually had a really good one for years, which I've heard a story that might be similar to the underspin, that it wasn't marketed as heavy because John wanted to keep winning tournaments on it. So we had a really good one, but again, it wasn't marketed, so it kind of fell out of the lineup. But other companies who have tried to mass produce them, they're just not right. And it's really important to have good quality marabou feathers, to trim those feathers so you don't have any of the stems or hard parts in them, a good hook, and a good tie job.
Yep.
And like I said, we know how to do it. John ties his own, Gussie we tie our own.
Yep.
But we just haven't made that step back into it because we've been walleye focused the last few years. And with this new addition of the bass stuff, we're like, okay, we got to bring the marabou back. So we got this marabou jig. Hands down, it's the best mass-produced one on the market. The only thing you're going to find comparable to it is the guys that are selling them for $14 a piece, who hand tie them in their garage. So these are all hand tied at our factory. The feathers are super, super good quality. It's going to be awesome because now we don't have to spend our time tying them anymore.
That's right.
You can just go buy them, and I think the MSRP on them is like $8.99 for a 2-pack.
Exactly.
So it's a really good price, but the quality is 100% there. And again, that's got a Gamakatsu 604 in it. So the hook backs it up, part of our Elite Series line. So
3 different sizes. The light sizes that I mean, the smallmouth guys use 16th, 332nd, and 8th.
Yep.
3 colors, 2 of them. One's a black purple, and a brown.
And a brown, yep.
Black is definitely the most popular. It looks like a little leech. Yeah, that's an exciting one for the smallmouth guys for sure.
It's another great one if you have young kids and you going to a trip in Canada and they just want to get bit.
Sure.
All you got to do is tie it on. You throw it out there.
Slowly bring it back to the boat.
Close the bail and just slowly bring it back to the boat, just a few feet under the surface, and the smallmouth cannot resist it. Gussie's described it to us. That's just like a little after dinner mint for them.
That's right.
You see that little cupcake sitting on the table, and you're not going to pass it up. It's just there, and it's one bite. And,
Or you can just hang it over the side of the boat.
Yeah. Oh, there's been a lot of bass tournaments. One with the guy in the back, the tournament partner. He's just
dragging one. Yeah.
Has a hair jig back there about 15 feet, and the bass that are curious of the boat will come up and grab that thing. And like you said, it's just a little after dinner mint that they can't pass up.
And it shines, I would say, definitely early in the year, but it works most of the year, unless they're really, really deep, just because they're so light, because they don't sink well. But anytime there's smallmouth up shallow, a hair jig is a great option, or a marabou jig. So
awesome.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up.
There's a lot of products to get through.
Our 2024 new product. I think this probably could be the longest.
The only thing you got left here is Wonderbread weights.
Oh, you're gonna add one more, Joe?
Oh, we don't want to leave anybody out.
That's right. That's right.
So, this one, as well as some of the others, has been kind of out, kind of available. It's been around. But that's another new product for 2024. Wonderbread weights, people.
They just look good. And there'll forever be the debate if a colored weight helps you catch more fish or not. But I believe it attracts them in. It's the first thing they see rolls by them. And then, like the marabou jig, it's a juicy little snack.
100%.
Trailing behind it, so why pass it in?
What we have learned is that no matter how ugly this color is, it still attracts them. It still catches them. If anybody out there can tell us the science behind why walleyes love polka dots, colored polka dots, you let us know. You hit us up in the comments. Tell us the citizen science behind it.
I have my hot take.
Oh, okay, so we got one right here. What do you got?
Fish key in on eyes, and they key on circles. So it attracts them because it looks like a bunch of eyes rolling by.
And it's bright and flashy.
And it's bright and flashy. Then they see a nice little eye candy snack dragging behind a rig. And
okay. So what all...
They're curious.
What weights do we have coming in Wonderbread colors here, Sam?
The Rock Runner bottom bouncers, the Rock Runner slip bouncers, the keel and torpedo weights, and I think that wraps it up.
And but that's basically all sizes that
the current existed. Northland walleye weight program minus the slick stick bottom bouncer.
Okay,
it's gonna have them.
So your classic Rock Runner bottom bouncer, the keel weight, torpedo weight.
Yep.
Any of the weights.
Any
that you
heavy
need for
heavy walleye terminal weight.
Pulling rigs.
Yep. And Great Lakes guys, clear waters, where Wonderbread was born. Why not have a little bit of an attractor to pull those fish in before your rig pulls by?
You can see it from a long ways in clear water.
Yeah. So they got the super glow paint on them, so they glow really well too. So nice little addition, and they look cool. We love Wonderbread. Well, you said it looks ugly, but
I mean, it depends on who you're talking to.
That's right.
But if you want to tell us why you think Wonderbread is such a fish catcher, drop it in the comments. Maybe we'll pick out the best idea on the next one.
That's what we'll run with.
Yeah,
that's right.
Or the best guess. Maybe we'll send them some Wonderbread weights.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Send some Wonderbread.
Let's do that.
Are we doing regular or wrong answers only?
Good answers.
Good answers. So either or.
Creative answers.
Creative answers.
Hit us in the comments and what do you think? We'll slap hashtag Joe knows on there.
Hashtag
he doesn't know, but tell me. And then maybe you'll find yourself with some brand new Wonderbread weights next time.
Joe Wonder.
Who knows? Maybe some of those other new stuff too.
Hashtag Joe Wonder. Joe's Wonders.
Joe's Wonders?
Yeah.
Okay, hashtag Joe's Wonders. JoesWonder.
I think this is our.
And let's see what we got.
So we got eye candy. We got new deep V spin, deep V flash tail. We got new Pitchin Puppet. We got new Tungsten 16th ounce sizes. And then we got Tungsten panfish jigs. And then we got Smeltinator underspin.
Rumble Bug
and
micros.
We got Rumble Bug, micros,
And marabou.
marabou.
That's it.
And new color weights.
That's right.
Hashtag Joe's Wonders.
So hopefully we get some open water, which looks like it's going to come sooner rather than later, and get out and enjoy some of these new products. And I hope you guys all try them too. So thanks for tuning in, listening all the way to the end here, and we'll be back with more from the Northland Fisherman.
Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.